There was a woman who was divorced and having a very difficult time with her teenage daughter. And things were just kind of spinning out of control until one night that her daughter was picked up for drunk driving. So she goes and brings her home for the night. You can imagine the chill that was between them. They didn't speak at all on that drive home, nor did they speak at all the next day. The girl was caught up in her shame, and the mother really didn't know what to do. Till she got inspired and she gave her daughter this small little gift. Her daughter opened up the gift and kind of rolled her eyes and, "Mom, what's this?" In the box was a stone. "Well, honey, read the note. I have a note there for you." And then the note said that basically, "My daughter, this stone is 200 million years old. In that amount of time, I will never give up on you." You can imagine that reconciliation happened at that point. We can relate to that story because in some ways that story is us. That when we hurt one another, when we hurt God, we can be caught up in that guilt and shame and that silence, that distance between us, between others, can seem irreparable. We don't know what to say or know what to do. We don't know how to work reconciliation, and that distance can just grow over time if we don't find a way or if something happens to change. But what was so important was the mother reaching out to her daughter, showing that steadfast love that was always there for her. No matter what she says, "I'll be there for you." That allowed that reconciliation to happen. It helped the girl to let go of her shame and her guilt and to be forgiven. The story of that mother is similar to what Jesus is telling us about our God. In this most beautiful chapter in the Bible, the 15th chapter of Luke, these three parables are telling us that. But before we go into those three parables, we see that in the first reading, don't we? Where that beautiful dialogue with Moses and God. God who seemingly was giving up on his people that were so stubborn, that kept turning their back on him, and every time that God would rescue them, they'd kind of follow along for a little while, and then they would go back to their old ways. But remember what Moses was doing to God. Kind of interesting. "Hey, God, remember who you are. Remember what you did. Remember how great you are, that you saved. These are the people you chose. These are the people you saved. These are the people you love. Are you going to abandon them? Of course not. You are a faithful God." And I wonder if we don't need to do the same in our lives. When we suffer that distance that comes from our sinfulness, the conflicts that we suffer with one another, the lack of forgiveness that has not yet been realized, the relationship that needs to be restored with Christ. Don't we understand? Don't we need to remind ourselves? It's not so much telling God, God is God. But we need to be reminded who he is. And that's what Jesus is telling us today. Who is our God? And can we be in a situation that we are so lost that God cannot save us, that God cannot rescue us? He's saying, no, it's the nature of God. Look at the nature of God in these parables. Because God is the shepherd. God is the woman. God is the father waiting for his son to return. God who will do anything, will go to even every extreme to find his son, his daughter, who may be lost. Find us when we're lost. And when we're lost, we can be like one of those two sons in that last parable. We can be that rebellious son that maybe completely turned our backs on God and walked out, saying, God, I want nothing at all to do with you. I want to live life on my own terms. Or it can be more of our everyday rebellion in our lives, where we just want to be like that little child that wants to do things our own way, when we want to do them, how we want to do them, and we keep asserting our pride like that, forgetting or neglecting or not caring to do the will of God. So we're that younger son who needs to come back to our senses and find that God that's waiting for us. Or we can be like that older son that we're so caught up in our righteousness that we don't want to forgive, that we can justify any action that we do, not wanting to admit our need for God, that we're even a little bit lost at all, not realizing that everything we have from God is right in front of us. But in our own stubborn pride, we fail to go into the house, to be one with our Father. So again, I've been focusing on ourselves, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the parables is our God who comes to us. A God who's like that Father. Imagine that in that day, where the Father was everything. He was a patriarch of that extended family. People came to him. He didn't go out looking for his children, his servants. They had to come to him. And here he is every day waiting for his son, running like a crazy man when he sees him. That's our God. That's our God that wants us to be reconciled with him. That's our God that wants us to be reconciled with one another. And that's the example that we are called to search out, like this mother did with her daughter. Those that may be lost, those that need to be reconciled and brought back into the fold. Jesus tells us in John's Gospel, love one another as I have loved you. Are we willing this week to do that? But before we do what we can to reach out and to bring in the lost, we need to understand how we ourselves, even it might not be a dramatic way, but are lost and need to be reconciled. How we need that mercy and that love of God. We come before our Lord in this banquet of his love, his mercy. God who comes not waiting for us to return to him necessarily, but is reaching out to us. Will do everything to find us and to bring us back into his love, to bring us into his fold, and to bring us into his home. Let us celebrate that love of God for us today.